Hey golfers, and welcome back to the Second Swing YouTube channel for another Live at Lunch. Today we're back in the tour van at Minnetonka for another fun discussion on, well, we talked about this a little bit on the podcast actually yesterday on 7 woods and why they're so popular. And so today we're going to do some testing of some of the most popular, most successful 7 woods in fittings so far this year in 2024. So I've got Tyler Fitzel with me today, back to help us out with the fitter analysis, if you will. So Tyler, 7 woods, kind of, you obviously, we chatted about it on the Second Swing Thoughts podcast. Check that out if you haven't yet, as to why 7 woods are trendy nowadays, and it really didn't used to be the case a few years ago. So as we kind of get some people joining in the chat and watching on YouTube right now, talk to us about 7 woods and what you've seen throughout the year in fittings.
Yeah, one of the things that when you take a look at the bag in general, we start to kind of piece the bag together with different parts, and you've got to have a club that has a purpose. One of the things we talked about on the top end of the bag, like we've talked about wedges on the bottom end of the bag, we talked about the irons, what's the longest iron, what's the next club, and that's one of the things that I think we have. One of the advantages in technology now, right? We could go out before and we may not have known, all right, well, this flies higher, this carries further, but what's it spinning? We can look more at optimizing the numbers. 7 woods as a category have been huge because they've been around a long, long time. And for me, one of the things about the 7 wood is getting that ball up in the air so that you have more height, so you can get that ball to drop down at a steeper angle, get it to stick a little bit closer. What we find is that one of the great correlations to this is you've got a 4 iron, a 4 hybrid, and a 7 wood. They're all the same sort of length. And that's one of the things that we want to look at. All right, does an iron work for you? Does a hybrid work for you? Does a fairway wood work for you? Yeah. Those are the types of things that we want to look at in a regular fitting. So a great conversation today.
Yeah, so that's the cool part about this is I actually went ahead already and kind of did some investigation, some research, so to speak, ahead of time here, because I grabbed a 4 utility iron and a 4 hybrid off of kind of our sales floor here, just some used clubs, both with extra stiff shafts. And I hit some shots, we've got some data to look at to start with, and then we can kind of start this whole testing here by comparing that 4 utility, a 4 hybrid, and then a 7 wood, and the lofts are similar in that regard. I think they're in that 21 degree range, all these clubs. And so the difference I think that's going to be, I expect to see, is that with the longer shaft of a 7 wood, the club speed will be different, but between these two we can kind of talk about these numbers and then maybe what we expect to see with the 7 woods we're going to hit.
Yeah, let's go back to the 4 iron as an example. An iron in its general form comes off a little bit lower, so trajectory is a part of that. Well, the 4 things that we talk about in terms of the golf ball, so ball speed, launch, spin, and then direction. Well, in terms of the ball speed, the bigger the club gets, the more flexible the face gets, the more the center of gravity is moving, you can get something to have more ball speed. If you've got a 4 iron and a 4 hybrid and they're kind of close in length, like actual length of the club, they may not separate themselves a tremendous amount in terms of the ball speed or the swing speed, but they will usually in the ball speed. No, sorry, not the ball speed, the launch. Yeah, it's like that's where they're going to change the difference. It's really trajectory. It's getting that ball in the air. So the same thing is true. Is like pretty much everything we're going to be testing is like 21 degrees. Yeah. And if you start looking at it, if an iron's coming off a little bit lower, but if you're, let's say you're a high launch, high spin player, well then an iron might be okay for you. Right. Then all of a sudden we're like, well, no, I need a little bit of help with that. Well, then a hybrid might be okay. Well, I need a lot of help with that. Well, then a 7 wood might be okay.
And that's why it's been so popular. Because I think I think more golfers than not are maybe struggling at this part of the bag to get the ball in the air. Yes. So that's why you've seen 7 woods, 9 woods even in fittings be a really good option. So we have a question already from Eric here on the chat. He's asking about shallower versus deeper faces and how much that might have an impact. He says, I love a shallow face 3 wood, but I prefer a deeper face on a 7 wood because it's a club I want to be able to chop out of the rough. So can you talk about the performance of a fairway wood or maybe even a hybrid as it relates to the depth of the face being shallow? Because I know the shallower the club, maybe the lower center of gravity. So kind of talk about those dynamics there.
Yeah, that's one of the things with, as we talk about it, deeper face as an example on something, is if you have something that's a little bit deeper, you may catch it a little bit higher if you're trying to get down into it. Maybe you catch it a little bit lower. The deeper face can maybe, if you catch it a little higher on the face and there's more of it, climbs up. So you can get it up, you can get it out, you can still maintain some ball speed, you can get some good good spin. It's not making it spin as much as if you were to hit it on the bottom. And even if we looked at it from, here's two clubs on the leading in the market right now. You've got a Titleist and you've got a Ping. And when we look at it in terms of the deepness of the face, you'll notice is like the Titleist should have a little deeper face.
Yep.
If you're talking about it within a company itself, like if we're talking about it Titleist to Titleist, you're probably not going to find a lot of differences in the deepness of the face.
Yeah.
If you're someone that does have a steep attack angle, a deeper face, it's probably what you want to look for. Because if it's a little thinner and digs in, that thinner face or shallow face, that's going to get down and underneath, and you don't
maybe too far underneath.
That's right. You don't want to go too far underneath.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So, so today let's kind of look at these numbers to start. What we've got on the TrackMan right now. It actually in the testing I hit, I think 5, 6, maybe 7 shots. Call it with a 4-iron. Again, the 4-iron was a Cobra King utility iron, and then the hybrid was a Ping G425.
Right.
And both had extra stiff shafts. And so we kind of have this as sort of a baseline to maybe then look at the 7 woods.
Yeah.
But basically, you talked about launch and trajectory as being the big difference in these clubs.
Yeah.
And you can see it here, launch angle and height. And I was also able, for whatever reason, to turn over the 4-iron a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which probably contributed to the difference in launch and height. But we're seeing a pretty big difference in those 2 regards. But the distance on them is actually the same almost with both.
Yeah, and so if we wanted to take a quick peek at this, on average, you could say, I'm not going to cherry pick anything out of this for the moment. We'll just leave the average where it is.
Yep.
But if we're looking at the 4-iron at 12, 12, 11, 11, 10, 11, pretty consistent average in terms of its launch angle. You come back to the 4 hybrid, it's 16, 14, 15, 13, 15. Yeah, there's a 9 in that, maybe skews it a bit.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, there's not a lot of difference in terms of the length of the clubs. They're very similar to one another. So with that, we probably don't see a lot of difference in ball speed, but we do see a little. There just happens to be a little bit more on the 4-iron for you. Not a problem. They're very similar. But what's not is the launch angle.
Yeah.
And so the carry distance to the total distance is kind of similar in it, but not in the peak height. And the peak height in the 4-iron was about 91 to the peak height in the hybrid. Now, I say that, with the 4-iron, I don't need to change anything. I could even probably change off, just hide this one as a quick example. In the 4 hybrid, you had one that came off really low.
Yeah.
Okay. You see the carry distance is not a whole lot different, but the peak height is. So now that hybrid's coming in steeper. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to look to something like the hybrid as being a better club downrange.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that landing angle piece right there?
Yeah, it's a little steeper on that one, and that's something that we're looking for. I want to see if I can get that club or get that ball to maybe come in a little steeper. This also goes into, we're not talking about shafts here. Shafts do have an impact in terms of launch and spins and directions.
And if this was a true fitting, obviously we'd dive into the shaft and even the hosel on a couple of these and really dive in. This is just kind of purely the idea of what 7 woods provide a golfer.
Right, and so then the other part of this is, all right, what am I going to put in the bag? And so when we start talking about the bag in and of itself, you get into this where you've got 14 clubs that you can carry in a round of golf, if you talk about traditional golf, right? USGA rules. You can have more than 14 clubs. You could have 15, 16, 17 clubs. You may have things that go in and out. Right. But when we start looking at the longer irons, and they're not as effective, you start looking at hybrids. Well, I don't need a 3 and a 4 hybrid at the same time, because they're going to do very, very similar things, launches and ball speeds, maybe some differences in distance by 5 or 10 yards. Well, now all of a sudden, I get into the next club. I don't need 2 hybrids and 2 fairways and then a driver.
Yeah.
And kind of piggybacking on our podcast that we did this week, we talked about one of the other trends F7 woods was mini drivers. Well, so that's another piece of the puzzle where someone might want a mini driver. It's like you might have a mini driver to get some more distance off the tee and then become a 7 wood that gets you some more launch angle on it too. So we see in the stats that you'd hit some shots, you're loosening up here. We're seeing what I was mentioning.
Yeah.
Now, it's always great. I don't put myself into a little bit of a box and say, oh yeah, this is supposed to do this. It generally does.
Yeah.
My prediction as we get into the 7 woods and we start hitting some 7 woods, we're going to see more launch. That's one thing. We'll probably see some more ball speed because we might have a thinner face, we have a deeper center of gravity, we have a longer shaft, so we're going to get into some more club head speed.
Which brings up another piece of this. Actually, Coach Schumann there made a comment, got fitted for a 7-wood in July, TSR2, 65-gram stiff shaft, loved it so much, pieced together a 9-wood, so now he's got rid of my hybrids, so he goes 6-iron, 9-wood, 7-wood, 4-wood. And so it brings up this idea that, I mean, we're going to find out today, I think, too, potentially. We see sometimes players might have a 7-wood and a 4 hybrid in the bag, depending on what the clubs do for them.
Yes.
So that's also possible. Like, so, you know, I know in the fittings you try not to look at the number on the club as far as lofted things. Just make sure they gap correctly.
That's exactly what I would say.
And so not that might not happen today necessarily, but I know I know a couple of my friends that have, for example, a 5-wood and a 3-iron in the bag, even though the lofts are the same.
Yep.
So things like that can happen.
Well, 2 different shots, and that's what I was going to say is it becomes interesting as we start looking at what we're seeing in the numbers. It's optimized. Let's find the optimized.
Right.
And so, well, all right, let's get started with that.
Yeah, give me one of those.
Any, mini, miny, mo. Well, the one that's sticking up first and forward is
one that's calling your name.
Yeah, it's a Ping, and we've got
G430.
G430 Max. Yep.
So with this one, we've got
there.
Kylie, extra stiff. Kylie White.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the shaft in this. We've grabbed very heavy and extra stiff in all of them. So from that perspective, these are all probably that 70s and 80s.
Yep, and so
and extra stiff.
And another note too that Coach Schumann brought up is the fact that as of right now, not every manufacturer has 7-woods and 9-woods with the adjustable hosel.
Yes.
G430 is adjustable, which is nice. But he even notes, you know, it's a mistake when it comes to the 9-wood because he's got a 9-wood in the bag, lack of availability of, you know, the shafts or the, you know, adjustments, especially with him in the stiff shaft. He's finding that to be an issue where there's not that many options for someone like him that wants a 9-wood in that stiff shaft.
It's a really good point, and when you start to look at manufacturers that way, it's hard to break them down when you say, okay, Ping has the G430 model. When you start looking at 7-woods, they have one. It's not like they have different models of the 7-wood.
Yeah.
You talk about Titleist as an example. Titleist, you can get into the TSR2. We're going to use a GT2. They don't make a GT3, so in a 7-wood.
Yeah.
When you start looking at some of the differences that you can get adjustable with. But one of the things about that too is, we talked about this with hybrids. So there's 20 or 21 degrees in 3 different hybrids from Titleist. So you have kind of a little skinnier, smaller, to a little bit bigger, to a little bit bigger. So you can start using hybrids in this realm too, because hybrids have been blended together. They're making hybrids of hybrids, you know.
Right.
So
you have your Apex UW or you know, things like that that are kind of. Yeah.
All right, let's hit a few and see what we get here.
So the G430, and what's new for me, because I don't hit a 7-wood in my bag, but you can just see so much of the face here. But it's, in a way, it's confidence inspiring to know that you're going to get that club head underneath the ball. Slightly towards the toe, but I think it's going to work. Oh, yeah.
Awesome swing. Those are great numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Heard that a few times today. Did we use that line this morning?
Probably.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Love it. Good.
Oh, interesting. Didn't get all the numbers on that one.
No, but you know, some of the main ones that we're looking for in this instance is ball speed, launch, and spin. And
yeah,
we got that.
Which we got those. And
yeah, for those of you that aren't necessarily TrackMan savvy with this.
Ooh, that's a bad swing.
When TrackMan doesn't get the when it doesn't quite pick up what the club was doing, as an example, it makes the ball flight just kind of look straight.
Yeah, right.
And it's not necessarily a good versus a bad thing, because at the end of the day, we've talked about this, I've talked about it ad nauseum in the idea it's like ball speed, launch, spin, direction, ball speed, launch, spin, direction. One of the other questions that we'd had from somebody watching was the idea of why don't we have heavier and stiffer shafts for things like 7-woods or maybe even 9-woods from the OEMs. And The original equipment manufacturers are picking up on this. They're starting to cater to that.
That's better.
We have, right now, we have a 7-wood that's a bonded from Callaway. That's one of our demo clubs so that we can hit it. We also have this from Ping, and that's part of our portfolio. This is also a fitting club. We also have a Titleist GT2 with an extra stiff, heavy shaft in it.
Yep.
This is actually one that's for sale, but we also have that option to swing. And what we've done, even as a company in our fitting bays in the tour van, is tried to get those options more available, because that is where you're going to find the differences. Someone comes in and the comment was, you know, oh, well, testing a 5-wood is not like testing a 7-wood. Absolutely, 100%. And so it's one of the things that we try to do. And you know, frankly, is when trends start to swing that way, we're going to get more clubs that are like that.
Ooh, you're going to take that one out for sure.
Ah, well.
I'm not swinging too great, Tyler, so I'm glad you're sharing some good stuff that people can be entertained by, because
we'll take that one
I won't
off.
be entertained by my
That's okay.
my missus out there way right over there.
Yeah, what do you, I don't know, what are you doing?
I don't know where I'm
Do you
going.
need to get back in there and swing?
Yeah, probably. Okay, that's the worst one so far.
All right, well.
Let me get one more good one here.
Okay.
I'm not turning on the ball. There we go.
Excellent.
That's the best one.
Okay, good.
Turned on that one.
But let's just go back to a quick look at some of the factors, right? Ball speed, launch, and spin that we were talking about. In this case, we've got ball speed that's up. So you saw the 4-iron had a little bit more. Not a problem. You had the hybrid with it's really close. It's within a mile or two of one another, but we're talking about probably 7-8 miles an hour here. As we start going from club to club type, so for instance, if we start moving from an iron to a hybrid to a fairway wood, we'd like to see somewhere between maybe 8 to 10 miles an hour of ball speed difference.
Okay.
That starts to include the length of the shaft, which can be swinging faster. It includes the thinness of the face and the more forgiving aspect of the club type that you're looking at. We did see more ball speed, awesome. We did see a little bit more launch on average than the hybrid. We did see a little bit more spin. We saw 10 more yards. That 10 yards is more the ball speed than it is the launch or the spin.
Yeah.
So now when we start talking about, now we had a steeper landing angle and we have a little bit more distance. The launch and spin are pretty close because this is 21 degrees.
See, this is what I was talking about too, about the possibility. Now, I don't know if 11 yards is enough of a gap, but the possibility of a 7-wood and a 4-iron, say, in the bag.
Right.
Now, I don't know if that's a big enough gap for someone with these numbers, but you can see how that could be possible for someone.
Yeah.
If let's say that number is 15 yards difference, then you got yourself both options in the bag if you want them.
Well, there's two places in the bag when things tend to squish together a bit more in gapping distances.
Yeah.
And that's on the top end of your bag. Maybe not the driver, but we hear this all the time. Well, it's, you know, my 3-wood's going as far as my driver. Okay, well then that's getting pushed together. So we need to rethink what's going on. If the driver's the long club, it's going to give me the best distance possible. Let's optimize the driver. If we've got that, those next clubs below that need to get separated in the gapping.
Yep.
Same thing happens on the bottom of the bag as we start talking about wedges. You know, do I need 4 wedges, 5 wedges? How many wedges do I have? You know, and that's a different conversation for a different day. But what I'm looking at with this is I'm saying, this is a really, really good club. Gives us something that will take off a little bit faster, take off a little bit higher, spin a little more, come down a little steeper.
Yep.
This now is enough of a separation depending on how optimal the other clubs are.
Right, and that kind of gets to what this question from Eric is actually.
Yeah.
You know, when you have Drew speed, how high is too high?
Yeah.
Is that such a thing? You know, you lose consistency, which, again, he watched all my shots. He sees my dispersion. This is being friendly to me based on how I was swinging this club. So, you know, there's that element of you know, this conversation that has to be taken into account too. Because I haven't played a 7-wood. Because I, for the most part, have the speed needed to play a utility iron. I'll get the ball up in the air. You know, even this was a 4-iron. a little bit. I can get that ball 85 to 100 feet in the air for the
Yeah.
most part, and rarely am I needing a 250-yard shot that sticks on the green.
Yeah.
And so, but these are very high in the air, like it's
Yeah.
135 feet or whatever. So
We'll
is
talk real
is that
quick
too high?
Height in terms of speed, how high is too high?
Yeah.
Let's talk about both. Ball speed to start with. Ball speed is a combination, right? It has to do with club speed. It also has to do with how well you hit it. There are other factors that go into it. If you're not aware, smash factor is a great way of looking at that efficiency between club speed and ball speed.
Yeah.
That's regulated, and don't quote me on this one, but I thought it was anything that's 19 degrees or lower.
I actually don't know what the rule is, so I'm gonna have to.
So let's just say, for instance, let's go with that. So the fastest we can get a ball to go is 1.5 times the speed of the club. When we add turf into it, when we add different lie angles, when we add different swing path, face, attack, as we hit locations, that's where you're going to start to see differences in the distances on, like, say, one club, and maybe the dispersion's a little bit wider. But if you get a smash factor of 1.49, for that club speed, for that ball speed, we've got as much as we can get out of it.
Yeah, pretty much.
The question becomes, if you're doing 1.49 consistently versus throwing a 1.39 in there.
Like that one.
Yeah, like this one right here.
Yep.
So that one didn't have that sort of ball speed. Now, is that club in your swing capable of it? Absolutely. We also have to look at its consistency. And if you're looking back even at like the 4-iron, you see 1.45, 6, 7, 6, 3. You go back into the hybrid, that wasn't even as efficient. 4-4, a 6, a 9. So from efficiency, that 4-iron, you hit more solid,
Yeah.
which is why it had maybe a little bit more ball speed, which is why it was a little bit more consistent. That's another piece of this puzzle. What do you hit consistent?
Yeah, right.
So we have to optimize that as well. I'm looking at it, at least in this perspective, and I'm saying there is going to be too much, but on a shot-by-shot difference, it's going to change based on too many factors for us to say, well, you have to spin this at X amount for that to be a good shot. It's not really about that.
So it's, yeah, which is the nice thing about, 30-day play guarantee and things like that,
Right.
where it's a trial and everything, and that's why so many players, on tour and whatnot, actually have multiple options at this point in the bag. With them, you mentioned having 16 or 15 clubs.
Yeah.
If they're going to go on a windy day, maybe I probably wouldn't play a 7-wood if it's going to be a 25-mile-an-hour windy day, because I hit this thing up there, it's going to go everywhere else. But
Well, take a quick peek in terms of carry distance with this 7-wood, right? So we consider this a high trajectory because that high trajectory is fitting within the launch angle window. This is taking into effect your club speed for the ball speed. That's your smash factor. It's taking into effect the attack angle, which really starts to get into the launch and spin rate. If you're moving downward and this is down 2.3, that can help lower the launch. But in this case, you also might have caught this a little high on the face. Didn't pick it up with our lighting in here, but you might have caught it a little high in the face, so the spin's down. And so in that regard, with the spin down, that wasn't enough to get this to stop as quick as maybe as we wanted. Still a 10-yard window.
right.
Still a landing angle at 49. So as we start to break down some of the shots individually, here's another one that's more optimal with a high trajectory. You can see ball speed really high, really good. Smash factor, 1.47, that's up there. High launch, low spin. So one of the things you're not necessarily doing with this club, at least in this regard, is you're not necessarily spinning it. If we look at the overall,
So that's interesting. So this is saying, over 5,000 spin is what you're looking for. Is that what you'd say out of a 7-wood, or is this
I would say for you and the way you swing the club, this is what I'd be looking for.
interesting?
A couple things that we know about you tend to have an inside-out path.
Yep.
That tends to lower a little bit of the loft and a little bit of the spin, so that spin movement might be lower. The other part of this too is that might just be that club for you. We might find another club, another 21-degree club with, one, with adjustability. So we may be able to adjust that.
Yeah.
Two, we might find something automatically in a different club that spins more and suits our window. It's why you're here. It was like, why are we testing a bunch of 7-woods?
Yeah.
Well, that's just the first test. Could be the shaft, like that's low launch, low spin, but we're using that same shaft, low launch, low spin in everything. We're using heavy, we're using extra stiff. That's the whole purpose, is just you'd come in and every company's going to have a different set of shafts that they're kind of using.
Right.
So we try to match that up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of the difficult part with this particular thing is there's different shaft options for each club, I guess. But
Yeah.
So next one here as we transition. So this is actually the bonded one of the group.
Yep.
Paradigm, and this is the other interesting part about this is a very low spin club head.
Yeah, triple
This
diamond.
is the AI Smoke Triple Diamond.
The question becomes, does it?
Yeah, does it low spin?
Because when someone says, "Hey, I need low spin," because the ball. Here's the kind of the contradictory point to that. If the ball flies high, we think spin's the one that's causing it. If it's flying high because you get it with a launch angle up in the air, but it's not spinning, you don't need less spin. We don't bring that ball flight down with spin. What we do is we have to look at it in terms of the technology. So it's that combination I've talked about many a times: the swing, the club, and the ball.
Yep.
It's blending those three things together. So let's see what this does.
Yeah.
Triple diamond. We've seen this on tour.
Yeah.
Just like we've seen the Pings on tour, we've seen the Titleists, we've seen a bunch of the TaylorMade guys, all the staffs at that. We've had a lot more higher level, I'd say lower handicap, stronger swingers looking for these types of clubs and seeing a lot of success with them.
Yeah, which is, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would have never predicted something like that. It's just the glow up of a 7-wood has been really something to see. Let me get my swing back here. That was a decent start. I still have this tendency to kind of leave the face open with the 7-wood, at least so far today. There's some more speed. We'll say for what it's worth.
Good.
I know we're not talking too much about like aesthetics and feel and stuff, but this feels way firmer off the face than the Ping did. Curious on the spin on that one, because that was towards the toe a little bit. Okay, that makes sense. Look how much further that went because of the spin being down.
Yeah, a 7-wood that goes 270.
Yeah, that's pretty.
But therein lies one of the tricky parts to this is like we're talking about some pretty good club speeds, 105, averaging about 103. That's not a 7-wood as much as it says 7 on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's just a fairway wood.
Yeah.
It just becomes, all right, how much loft do I need?
That was hit well too. Yep, there's some ball speed. I suppose this club probably does, in comparison to the G430, probably has a tad of maybe fade bias to it, just a little bit more. You think, or no?
That's a great question, or comment if you want. So the lie angle on a 7-wood, and this is where things with adjustability, they start to get a little bit tricky. The reason I tend to gravitate to more adjustable clubs is so that a 7-wood traditionally has a steeper lie angle. And that is something that can turn over the club maybe a little bit more. That angle can help the club release, if you will, maybe getting the shot not quite as right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things, because when you add loft, where's that ball going to go? Well, it's going to go up. We don't necessarily need it just going straight up either. We would like to see it with a little bit more of a boring trajectory to that. So if you're closing up that face, it's going to come down, and you're going to get better ball speed, maybe better distance to it.
Right.
Well, this is not a knock on anyone that has a club that's bonded. If that's working well for you, great. If it's not, it could be that you just need a different lie angle, and we just have to find a different lie angle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't make that change.
Now, I don't know the specs on this, but I would wager that this club, because it's built as a tour club, has a flatter lie angle.
You would wager it? Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And so the standard or the bigger the AI Smoke, like the Max, or you get into the ones that have maybe a little more draw bias to them, they're bonded as well, but they probably have a lie angle. that
And
is a little bit
standard,
more
that's a little more
upright.
upright.
Yeah. So if you think about what the big companies are doing, they're trying to create a club to the masses. Well, this club is designed for the masses of stronger players, stronger swingers, because it's got a much heavier shaft, it's much stiffer.
Right.
And then also, if that's happening, you want to have you have a tendency to want to have a little bit more, maybe of a flatter lie angle. Players don't want to look down and see a shut face.
Right.
The last thing I ever want to see with a club is a duck hook out of it.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. I will say, I'll maybe hit one more here, but it seems like we've obviously got those two that were kind of like a lot lower spinning than the rest.
yeah. But again, I would actually leave it where it is.
Okay.
Because you got 6 shots out of it. That's a good comparison.
Yeah, I
to
did.
that.
Okay, I get 6 up there.
When I come back here and I'm going, all right, well, ball speed. On average, this was a little bit better.
Yeah.
The launch was a little bit lower. The spin is in the same spot. This rolled out a little bit farther.
You're right.
So now we're talking about a club that might fit this spot in your bag, but you may be looking for a little bit more distance. And if you are, you want the carry distance, but maybe the added benefit of a little more total distance.
Yeah.
So you can still, now you think about this, that's 242 in terms of carry. And granted, there are some 260 carries.
Right. Yeah.
I get that. 253. Just for this, let's take that
Yeah.
and just take it out for the moment, because I think one of the things that we want to look at is we can have that happen once in a while, but you'll notice that this has the most spin, the most ball speed, carry distance is pretty good, total distance pretty good. This had a little higher launch
Yeah.
and a little less spin, so that's pretty similar. Higher
Okay.
peak height, landing angle. Again, if I, just by the aesthetics in the feel, would you pick this club over the Ping?
I think I would. And yeah, it's a little firmer feeling, which I think is good and bad. I like the feedback it gave.
Yeah.
I know, I mean, it's a lower spinning club, a little more compact, which I think suits my eye as someone who hasn't really played a 7-wood before.
Right.
But I like it was
So the-
consistent. Would you be concerned about those couple of quote unquote flyers or no? I know with like an 8 or 9, a 7 iron, an iron, you'd be concerned about it. But what kind of level of concern is it at this club where I maybe hit the shot into a green once every few rounds?
Yeah.
This is primarily still going to be a tee club for me if I would put this in the bag, right?
Yeah.
I'd hit it more off the tee than I would actually into a par 5.
That's a great question. It's a tough one because, you might get outside, you might find that on turf you get a flyer, outside it might not. Also, this had the most spin. It just so happens on a couple of those shots, you had gotten that club where it just, the ball speed went up, the launch was higher, the spin dropped way down,
Yeah.
like half the spin. Was that the shot? Was it that the club? Was
Yeah.
that your swing?
Yeah.
Yes, I think flyer prevention is a huge piece to this puzzle, but it's also going to be something that happens with every one of the clubs, no matter what in your game. Like a flyer is going to happen with an iron for you too.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. This is from a mat. If I hit the ball in the rough, that the chance obviously goes up of a flyer with any club. So
it does.
There's no
Yeah.
way to truly prevent them all the time.
No,
But
so what I look at as the average, okay, so you had some that were out at 270, 270 yards. What I'm looking at it from this perspective, I'm saying it felt good, it looked good, it gave
did.
us good numbers.
Yep.
I'm saying overall, I think for you, this might be a little bit better fit.
Yeah.
Let's try
Okay.
Titleist then.
All right. So we got GT2.
Yeah, this is the brand new one on the market. The GT2 came out
wow.
August, late
Actually,
August.
Let me see that. I'm surprised at how small. Okay, they're pretty similar. When I first looked at it, I thought the GT2 was actually smaller. They're really close though
Yeah.
in size. The G430 is certainly the biggest footprint of the three.
Also, one of the things too is we were talking about depth. So,
Oh yeah.
if we look at this in terms of depth, try to put these two together and look at them in terms of the face, how deep the face is,
Looks like the Titleist one a little bit deeper.
maybe a little.
From my naked eye over here, yeah.
And even from size-wise, looking kind of like down at this is, it does look like this is maybe a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when we start talking about how deep this is, if we were to go grab maybe one of the AI Smoke 7 wood max,
Yeah, oh yeah.
that'd be thinner. So I think as we're talking about some of the models and the way that they're being built, you're also talking about who they're being built for.
Yeah.
Something like this can kind of fit in between for golfers. This is maybe a great club that we can put a lighter weight shaft for someone that maybe is not quite
This
as
is a
strong.
unique build. I mean, it's a GT2
Yeah.
7 wood,
Yeah.
but it's got, this is the hazardous black,
Yep.
80 gram extra stiff shaft. You don't see a lot of these out there. So
No, and another piece of that too is like this was just factory ordered because it's got a Titleist grip on it. That's
yeah, that's true.
oh, let's see what this does.
Ooh, felt good. Yeah. Ooh. That was the most over-the-top swing I think I've had today. Yeah. That checks out. 150 smash, though.
Yeah, and 156.8, almost 157 miles an hour. So ball speed wise, club speed's right in that 103, 104. So that's good, maintaining that.
That was good, too. Might draw some.
A little bit.
Oh, yeah. I like this so far.
Well, and you look at it from
Holy 250 carry on that one.
You turned it over.
Right.
Ball speed's up, so you got some ball speed here. Smash 150. Landing angle still 46, so you do have some stopping power. The height's 120 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Like, good combination.
This is good right now. I like this right now. I walk out of the store with this.
So one of the main technologies, as we talk a little bit about technology in these clubs, we noticed from Callaway as an example. Callaway's they've got the carbon fiber where they've got it on the top that helps free up some of the weight. That weight can then be put into different places, whether it's in this one or whether it's inside that we don't get to see quite as much with that. Titleist has adopted that. That's one of the things that Titleist has done now is they've put carbon fiber on the top. It's a different material. It still sounds like metal, looks like metal. They've covered it
still
up.
looks like a Titleist, which is a big deal.
the paint job that they have on it is giving it, it's kind of giving it that Titleist look like it doesn't have that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they're able to do is, again, kind of position the weight a little differently in the club. And I think it's huge because that's what companies are doing. They're trying to manipulate the weight into spots that benefit you to optimize your trajectories or your shot patterns, right or left, or creating more spin, taking it away.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it definitely, I mean, that's the cool thing about the entire GT line is they got that brand new crown and it's all changed, but it also looks exactly the same as it did before, So aesthetically, they've kind of achieved what they still want to achieve while making those changes. Ooh, that one's towards the toe again. That's my miss with the 7 wood apparently, is just that kind of toe open face hanging out to the right. I actually like that one spun more still, or like spun within the range of the other ones, because I feel like typically if you go toe, as we saw with the triple diamond, the thing could take off.
Yeah.
This one didn't really do that. All right, let's see how forgiving this club is. Oh. 141 smash, but it still gets out there.
Yeah, that one didn't have quite as much ball speed on it, but it also didn't have spin, so it got up in the air.
Right.
Well, take a look at the average on this. And one thing we noticed with this is, again, same sort of ball speed, about 153, same sort of launch, right in that 12. Spins down. So the highest spin we saw out of a club was the Callaway, the AI Smoke Triple Diamond in that. So it's interesting where the triple diamond, quote unquote, designed as maybe a lower spin, and the reality is it had the more spin out of any of the clubs for us. You're back up into the 244-ish carry distance.
Wow,
257, almost 256 is an average. Landing angles coming in at about 45 instead of 49 or 50.
Yeah.
So that's probably where we're seeing maybe a little bit more of the distance out of this.
Yeah.
We're launching it about the same.
I'm very surprised at how much more. It's almost like the GT2 7-wood is more like a hybrid in the way it's playing right now, in the sense of the launch angle is closer to the hybrid, or even actually lower than the hybrid. The spin rate is closer to the hybrid, right? We're talking about those things. The height is very similar, still higher, but then just the added length of the shaft and stuff is creating more speed, which is creating more distance.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it so much further than really anything else.
You know, if someone comes in for a fitting, the customers, let's say for instance, they tend to have a lower launch. They tend to spin it a little bit lower. Obviously, again, there's technology and technique. We're going to try to blend the two together. We want to find something in technology that helps with the way that their technique works. I'm not going to come in here and try to change up what you're doing with this. One of the things that you have a tendency to do is you have a tendency to come a little inside out.
Yes.
You
a
have
lot inside out.
Yeah, but you also have a tendency to come up through the ball, not a lot of down through the ball.
Yep.
So that in and of itself can help create a little bit more launch, but it might also create a little bit less spin, depending on kind of how you hit that ball. So if you're hitting it a little higher on the face.
Yeah.
So that plays into the idea. I was like, I got to take the player and the swing and what they're looking to achieve out of this, and I say, you know, we have 3 great options right here.
Yes.
What I'm saying is, for you, I would take the one that has more loft, because you can see what happens with more launch and loft and ball speed. You're carrying it farther. You're getting it to stop a little bit quicker. You come in and you have to tell me, it's like, well, where is the gap? Is the gap on? Is it my iron to my next club? Is it I've got an iron, love it, does exactly what I want. Hybrid, love it, does what I want. We see players come in all the time. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say, for instance, like you're a strong swing. You come in here, you have a 4-wood, never hit it. Okay? You've got a mini driver, and then on top of that, you've got a 3-iron.
Yeah.
Well, the hybrid doesn't really fit. We really don't use the 4-wood all that much. If I need to get shorter or more directional off the tee, I go mini driver. If I need to go a little bit longer, I just go driver. I've got all of the distance covered in those clubs. So now what do I do? Mm-hmm. I don't really like a hybrid. The hybrid's in the bag, but I don't play it. I don't like a 4-wood because it's kind of doing the same thing as my mini driver.
Yeah.
So I have to start looking at those clubs and kind of blending them together and say, well, maybe what we need here after the mini driver is a 5-wood.
Yeah.
And I can get rid of the hybrid. I can get rid of the 4-wood. I can start to squish those together.
Right, yeah.
But that also goes back to the beginning when I was talking about this in our conversation. You start looking at the top end of the bag. If you carry 14 clubs and you've already only got 13, and I take 2 of them and turn them into 1, and it fills the gaps that we really need, well, now all of a sudden I got 12 clubs in the bag. Yep. So now what do I do? And that's a conversation that we do see often. So it becomes two different directions with it. Well, one, if we know we've got the distances covered for our abilities and our swing, you just have less clubs.
Yeah.
You can always...
Which there's not a requirement you have to have 14 clubs.
No.
You can play with 10, 11, 12.
You aren't going to maybe spend as much money.
Yeah.
And that's not our goal is not necessarily the money side of it. It's getting you the right fit, because when you have the right fit, you're going to play better golf. That's always the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But the other side of this too is, well, let's look at the wedges. Do we want an extra wedge? Because you're really having
maybe you have 6
issues.
Degree gaps, and you can go to 4 degree gaps or something like that.
You know, there are plenty of them out there. Every company kind of makes a little chipper club, right? The little short kind of.
Right.
So maybe this is, well, I really just need something kind of for that. It allows you to put some other clubs in the bag. And I want to remind people, Phil Mickelson, doesn't matter, love him or hate him, won the Masters with 2 drivers and a British Open with 2 3-woods and no drivers. Mm-hmm. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really about finding what's going to fit in your bag. What are we going to put in there?
Right. So that's kind of that's a good way to start to kind of summarize this, because today was about comparing and contrasting some of the popular 7-woods,
Yeah.
which we've done, but it's also about why they work for so many people, why this higher lofted fairwood option is working, because as we saw in the testing today, the 7-wood, the higher lofted, bigger head,
Let's do this real quick.
generates higher launch. It generates, there's a little bit more forgiveness, and a lot of players need that extra launch and height at this part of the bag. And you can see with a 4-iron and a 4 hybrid, I also, because of the maybe lower launch and or shorter shaft, I wasn't hitting it as far. So there's advantages of the 7-wood for sure.
Yeah.
Now what are you going to do with this? I'm curious what you're doing here.
I'm just going to add some loft.
Okay.
It's like we have an adjustable club.
Yeah. One of the few out there in a 7-wood.
Yeah, let's find out what happens. Like, that's one of the reasons why this becomes a great test. So,
See, this, even looking at it, it looks a lot more like the G430 now in terms of like, right away, one of my comments was that I see so much of the face.
yeah.
I can see a lot of the face now.
Let's see what happens.
So adding some loft to a GT2 7-wood here. Got some dust on my hair. Ooh, bad swing.
Got loft.
That's over in, maybe still on the golf course.
Yeah, you got it over the Sulcan Bridge.
Ooh, hit that good.
Okay, good.
Launched plenty high.
Good. Spin.
Wow.
Good.
144 feet.
Yep. Yep. Landing angle 52.
Yeah,
That's stop and drop.
that
I
is
like
not
that.
going anywhere. If you get a soft green, that might come backwards. All right, that one launched a little lower.
A little. Still had spin.
Yeah, I like that. So, actually, here, I'll hit one more, then I got a question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
All right, that was a thinny, skinny ball. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. One more good one.
Ooh.
right.
Slightly fat, but I think it's going to work. Yeah.
Okay.
So what I was going to ask was, what exactly how much loft did you add, and is it almost like making it like an 8-wood?
Yeah, good question. So I added 2 degrees of loft. That's one of the adjustability factors for Titleist. There are other adjustability
degrees,
factors in some of the others.
Yep.
So we went from a 21 to a 23.
Wow. It's like a 9-wood with maybe a 7-wood shaft. So
Yeah. And that's another piece of this puzzle, right? If I want to get some, like the length of the shaft can play into this too.
yeah.
So like if I want more height for you, I might take the 21, but I might put a 5-wood length shaft in. Creates more club speed, creates more height
Right.
with the 21.
Yep.
Versus if I get that shorter, it maybe comes in a little bit, that might lower the launch a little bit. So we saw about a degree, same sort of ball speed,
Yeah.
but now we see about 4,300 RPMs of
So
spin.
the spin is back up where
Yep.
closer to the other 7-woods.
Yep, right closer to the other
Distance
ones.
is too.
And that doesn't make any of the other ones better versus like,
Yeah. You
worse.
just wanted to, I think you were mostly just curious and wanted to test
Right.
something.
So-
Because we can with the
And that's
GT2.
one of the things that we want to look at, right? So you really like let's say for instance, you love the way that looks, but that was coming in a little flat. Well, we have adjustability. You get outside, you're hitting it. Wow, this is too high. Then we get to turn it down.
Crank it.
Like we can- yeah.
Just flip it back.
And so we can put that into a different position. The other side of this, you talk about like ones that are bonded. The bonded ones are good. If they fit your eye, they fit the lie angle, if
Yeah.
they're getting the desired result out of that. It's no different than that club. If I've got it in its setting and you never change it,
Oh yeah, which honestly a lot of golfers don't.
it's just that we have maybe a little bit more to play with in terms of the adjustability.
Right.
And
I got a comment here from Coach Schumann who's been watching, and he made it. I mean, this is a lot of really the average swing speed player is probably having this particular kind of conversation, maybe more than most. But he says, it's top of the bag is difficult for that player. I need the 7 and 9 woods to stick greens. The hybrids do not launch high enough to do that. So different
Yes.
needs for different golfers. That's kind of what we're talking about. It's,
it is.
that's that's what these accomplish.
Yep.
7-wood, and this really is almost like a 9-wood or an 8-wood right now. But able to launch higher, more spin than the 4-iron, than the 4 hybrid. And so, I mean, ultimately, I think come in and see what you need. You know,
Yeah.
because this part of the bag can be so important. You know, so many players are just going, maybe they have a 4-iron, they throw a hybrid in there, and they go 3-wood, and you know, which that can work. But
you know,
so many options that it's worth trying.
That's one of the reasons why you want to come get fit, as we have options. So you take a look at it, someone comes in and says, I hate hybrids, I tried one once, I don't like them. That's okay. But someone comes in and says, well, I don't like fairway woods, I don't play them, I want a hybrid. There are so many different styles, different types, different sizes, different depths, different shapes, that when we really get down to it, we have to find some of those combinations. And that's the best way to do it, is actually come in, you know, get a bunch of those different combinations. We target that spot in the bag and see what we can do. The other side of it too is with our play guarantee, you have a chance to get outside, get out and play it, right? That might be the first thing that you do, is just like, that club needs to get outside, and you go, whoa, this is way too high. Well, then we know that we can move that down. Another piece of this is we talk a little bit about turf conditions. We say, we're hitting on a mat here.
Yeah.
This is the most perfect lie. This is the perfect environment. There's no wind, there's no temperature to deal with. There's no slope. But outside, all those things come into play. Right now, our temperature is about 65 and windy, as it says down in the corner.
There you go.
That makes the world a difference, because as soon as the ball's struck by a golf ball or the club, the environment takes over.
Yep.
In here, there's not necessarily as much environment that we have to worry about.
Which is why we give players the option.
That's why we want to test that and get into it, and then get outside.
If it doesn't work, we'll change it. You know, I mean, that's exactly what it is. So
yeah.
The last comment there from Sean, this is music to my ears. My biggest complaint previously about fitting was the lack of higher lofted fairway woods and hybrids and anything other than light or senior flex. And you mentioned that specifically on the podcast this week, which was a couple years ago. It was 7-wood might have had a regular flex, might have had a ladies flex, maybe a senior flex.
And they might have been bonded.
We didn't have, today we tested 3 different shafts or 3 different clubs with, you know, the extra stiff, heavy, like, you know, built for someone with my swing speed. So the options are now out there.
Well, and the other side of that too, it might not just be what's on the market. It might have been what's on the market last year, the year before, the year before. We have so many used clubs. It's literally what we do, right? That is one of the huge assets of our company and our fitting base, is we can go take that and say, hey, this is really where we want to be. This is really where we need to be.
Actually, often you guys are you're the fitting matrix, you guys are looking for something, and even out of the hundreds of thousands of combinations, there might be something you don't quite have in there.
Yeah.
Well, then let's just go check on the floor. You probably have something that fits.
Yeah.
Because all these, we got 20,000 just in this store used clubs, 160,000 in the entire company. So that's a good way to wrap, I think. I think that's pretty good. So golfers, if you have any other further questions or comments, leave them in the comments section under the video, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Thank you for tuning in to this live at lunch, wherever you're tuning in from. Next week, we do not have one. The team here, the video team, will actually be out on a content capturing trip. So 2 weeks from now, we'll be back on Halloween. We have a couple special guests lined up for that one. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and tune in. Tyler Fitzel.
Yeah.
Magnificent job today. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining. It was a blast for sure.
Keep your grooves clean. Stay razor sharp.
At Second Swing, it's your clubs. That's why we offer over 100,000 new and used golf clubs and a team of experts who help you find the perfect option for both your swing and your budget. Customize your bag with a tour-level fitting. Then trade in your current clubs to save even more on your upgrades. Change your game in store or online at secondswing.com.